We're all here today from a variety of backgrounds. Just briefly, from my own, I've worked as a journalist in Latin America, but I've also worked with NGOs here in Canada, in West Africa, as a volunteer, as a staff, as a communication staff, and I have a deeply personal interest in how do we engage as someone who, as a person who wants to engage as a volunteer or a donor, and then also how do we connect with the nonprofit groups that we're passionate about and that we feel closely to, or maybe we don't have a connection, but we want to make the right choice. So I think we're all here to learn a bit about, everyone that's here, but I think these panels are going to give us an opportunity to get to know some of the organizations that are represented in the room today, and hear both from their best practice in terms of engaging donors and volunteers and supporters, but then also share best practice for other organizations, saying what campaigns have worked best and what has been maybe more challenging. And I was going to mention the ice bucket challenge because I think it caught so many of our attention over the summer, and just on the questions that it raised around was it effective, and kind of the chance it provided to reflect on our own work on what do we try to accomplish when we set out to engage supporters and donors. So I want to give a big thank you and welcome to the panelists that are up here with me. They come from a mix of local and international, they represent groups that engage locally and internationally, which is great. And that's obviously primarily what we're going to touch on in this panel. But I think it's also an introduction to what we're going to delve into this afternoon in terms of how do we engage the community, whether that's the Hispanic community or with Hispanic programs. So let's get started. At the end there is Marco Guzman. Marco is the executive director of the Frontiers Foundation, and the Frontiers Foundation, as Marco will touch on, has programs both locally in Toronto and with Operation Beaver and in Bolivia and Haiti. So it has a really unique perspective on what it means to bridge cultures and engage people from a variety of different backgrounds, specifically with a focus on Indigenous issues or Indigenous communities. Next we have Barb Hogan, and Barb is the the Director of International Volunteering with Cuso. Many of you may be familiar with Cuso. They have programs all around the world. They engage hundreds of volunteers. I was living in West Africa actually for a while and met many Cuso volunteers, but they also have work with a lot of local programs in Latin America as well. Next is Bernardo Riveros. Bernardo is the co-founder of ILAC, the International Language Academy of Canada, which I believe is the largest language school here in Canada, with schools in Toronto and Vancouver. But there's also the ILAC Foundation, and I want to speak both about engaging international people here in Canada, but also the foundation side in that aspect. And then last but not least, we have Esteban Lasso, the Executive Director of Transforming Faces. Transforming Faces has a variety of local partners, and we're going to get into the very specific cause that Transforming Faces supports, and is a great example of how to engage people on a very specific cause and get people to be motivated of a community that's far away. So welcome to everyone. I want to start as the first question just to go through one by one and maybe share some of the best practice around some of the campaigns or projects that have worked best for your organization and what made them a success in terms of engaging the community. Why don't we start with you at the end, Marco?
My name is Marco. I was born and raised on the shores of Lake Titicaca in La Paz, Bolivia. It's located in the heart of South American continent, surrounded by friendly countries such as Peru, Chile, Argentina, Paraguay, and Brazil. But all these friendly countries took half of Bolivia believe it or not. If you have a look to your history books or geography books. So we do have very nice friends. Very nice friends. Anyway, in Canada, at Frontiers Foundation, we recruit volunteers. And the beauty of our program is thanks to them that come from around the world, from 72 countries, and the different Canadian provinces. Younger people like to travel from Quebec to British Columbia, from Nova Scotia to Northwest Territories, from Yukon to come all the way to Ontario, and so on. And this is one of the beauties of our program. They want to learn about the other provinces before they volunteer overseas. By doing that, they learn first about their own country, and then they are better prepared to serve in Africa, in Asia, in Latin America. The other component of this program, known as Operation Beaver. Operation Beaver, Beaver, as you know, means the Canadian mascot, the emblem that you will see in many buildings across the country. You know, it's the beaver, the cooperator. So we work together with the volunteers, with the local people. We use more and more in the last 10 years the local forestry, the trees. We cut the local people cut the trees, and they are asking for an engineer or an architect or a builder or a plumber or an electrician or a painting or a roofer to go to their communities to work together with them. So that's what we call the theology of voluntary service, you know, and that's what at Frontiers Foundation we promote. We have sent volunteers in the early days of Frontiers Foundation overseas, mostly to the Caribbean, and some people to Africa, not as many as Cuso volunteers, but we also brought volunteers from the Spanish-speaking countries, such as Spain, such as Mexico. We had volunteers from Guatemala, one from Salvador, one from Panama, volunteers from Colombia, and Peru, and Chile, and we had 10 volunteers from my country of origin, Bolivia. Now, these volunteers from Bolivia were indigenous peoples. That's the other beauty of our program, that we give them an opportunity to come to this country, and that otherwise they couldn't make it. So we give them an opportunity to come to this country to take part in our Operation Beaver program. So we send them to smaller communities in northern Ontario, northern Quebec, northern Manitoba, northern Saskatchewan, northern and southern Alberta, northern and southern British Columbia, northern and southern Yukon, southern communities in the Northwest Territories, and in the new province, in the new territory, the Nunavut. So that's what we do, and these volunteers are building or renovating houses in these smaller communities. And when I try to explain this, somebody in the audience says, "Oh, you sound like a Habitat for Humanity." They say, except we don't have Jimmy Carter in our board of directors, and so on. But probably you have many questions, and you tell me when to stop and so on, and or else I am gonna keep going on. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you very much for the opportunity to be here today. I'm really pleased and excited to share our experience at Cuso International. And I don't know how many here know of Cuso International. Let's see. Oh, there's quite a few of you. That's good. So Cuso International is an international development organization. And a key part of our work is that we work with the support of volunteers. So we each year have, from Canada, we place about 250 international volunteers a year. So that's our volunteers moving from Canada to work in our countries overseas, which includes Latin America, Caribbean, Africa, and Asia. We also have, and I think this is what is very unique and innovative about Cuso International, is we have a range of international volunteering models. So yes, we're moving people from north to south, but we have a program which we call our South to South Voluntary Program, which is, we have a number of volunteers, for example, from Colombia working in Peru, or volunteers from Peru working in Bolivia. So kind of that cross-regional sharing. We also have a national volunteering program where we're supporting and working with organizations in those countries where we work to really develop and enhance their own national volunteering schemes. So we're not doing the work for them, but we're supporting the organizations. And one of the ways that we're supporting organizations is through the placement of international volunteers as well. We also have, which I think is a really innovative program, it really has been evolving over the last couple of years, is what we call our Diaspora for Development program. And so what we've been doing is really trying to reach and broaden our relationships within the North American diaspora community. So about 7 years ago, we started working with the Guyanese communities. We started working with the Jamaican diaspora communities. And more recently, we've been doing a lot more work with the Latin American communities. And really that's building on what we found to be a real desire for people to give back to their countries of origin. And we've been quite open and trying to find that space to really involve those communities. We'll talk a little bit more about the different outreach into Hispanic communities, but that has been a real driver for our work in the last 2 years, because we know that in Latin America, there are desired skills there that we can find here in North America that can support our partners overseas. The other kind of work that we're doing is also e-volunteering. So one of the things that we've been hearing loud and clear from our diaspora communities is that we want to volunteer, but we're not able to pack up and go overseas for 6 months or a year. So we've been developing an e-volunteering program as well, with the idea that we'd be able to establish links with different diaspora organizations here in Canada that would be able to lend their expertise through technology to support the objectives of our programs overseas. So a range of different international volunteering models, and I was really interested in terms of what you were saying here about people really are motivated to give back, and that little nugget that you said about it's essential to human happiness, because I think it absolutely is, and we know that Canadian and North American society are big volunteers, and this is one way that diaspora communities in particular are finding their way to give back to their countries of origin. I just wanted to mention as well that the average age of our volunteers is 42. Many of you may know us as Canadian University Services Overseas from way back when, but the volunteers that we're placing overseas are skilled professionals, and they're not there to do the work of organizations, but they're there to support organizations to do their work better. So to build their capacity in finance, organizational development, fundraising, which is a real need for us, and a whole other range of skills as well.
Thank you. As I previously said to the organizers, I don't even know why I'm here. I'm not an expert in the philanthropy. I do not work in that field. I just, as my bio says, I represent a language school. I'm originally from Colombia, and I hope I can share some of my stories or my testimony with some of you that might be some help in terms of why should give or to whom or basically to tell my story in what I do in my business, not necessarily the business part, but how we donate to certain organizations, and as well as what I do on my personal level, which is there are two different things. Okay.
Thank you. And well, I'm excited to be here and tell you more about Transforming Faces. I've been 13 years linked with the organization. And basically, it was founded to help children with cleft lip and palate, which when I ask many people what cleft is, a lot of people just have a blank look in their faces. And cleft, many don't know, it's a very common human malformation. In fact, one every 700 children are born in Canada with this condition, but in China it could be one every 500. So 50,000 children are born every year with this condition. And in countries like Peru, it will be 4,000 to 5,000 children every year. And you may have seen some infomercials or heard about the plight of children with cleft lip and palate. But one message that I want to provide here in You Live Today is that one surgery does not solve the whole problem of a child with cleft. It's a treatment that spans over 20 years, and the child needs more than one surgery, and there's other treatments in speech, dentistry, psychological support, ENT specialists that are involved. So one of the major work that we do in terms of getting people involved is educating them about what cleft lip and palate is. Another one is to create windows of opportunities for them to see the work that we're doing, and hopefully we can talk a little bit more about that. And in terms of fundraising, Transforming Faces has a unique approach, and I always say to the people that I talk about Transforming Faces that we've been blessed to have a foundation that has believed in the need to provide a holistic treatment to children, and with their support we're able to direct 100% of all the donations that we raised in Canada and international for direct programs. And this is possible because the private foundation covers our overhead. So in the last 15 years, our challenge has been to ensure that Transforming Faces continue to be a small, flexible, innovative, cost-efficient operation so that we can take advantage of that opportunity and ensure that children all around the world can be treated with this condition. So I remember when I started this organization, working with the organization, we had 100 children that had been treated, and now we're over 10,000 children. And last year alone, we did 30,000 operations and medical interventions. And this is not possible if we don't have volunteers too. And the volunteers, not only from Hospital for Sick Children or orthodontists that have large private practices in Forest Hill, but the people in the countries themselves who are local physicians who receiving training, who learn more about this pathology, and the organization or partners who are raising money themselves. So one part of our core programming is to ensure that the culture of philanthropy is instilled in each one of these countries. So we have a program in Thailand where 20%, or between 10 and 20% of the total budget, we raise locally through different ways. So I hope we can talk a little bit more about this as we go along.
Great, thank you. And I think we've touched on a few things that I think a lot of us were wondering, how do we engage either a volunteer or a supporter in a sustainable way? And I think sustainability is really important in terms of, is this a one-off donation or a one-time volunteer experience, or how do we engage someone for potentially their lifetime and get them to feel close to the cause or the program? But specifically on the Hispanic community, some of us are part of the Hispanic community and others engage with volunteers or local programs. And I want to ask each of you what you think makes a Hispanic donor or volunteer or program different than other members of the community, and how have you engaged with them because of that? I'm thinking specifically, the first thing that comes to mind is many of us might support a program because it is directly connected to, say, where we're from, or it's a group that works with refugees and immigrants because we might be a refugee or an immigrant and can share that experience, or there might be someone that you know in your neighborhood that, I'm thinking of sending educational supplies or fire trucks or money because there's been an earthquake or what have you. So a lot of us can more closely connect when, we have that personal connection. But what have each of you felt? And I want to start with Esteban, just how you get people. Is it mostly your supporters mostly have a connection to the program areas where you work, or is it a range?
Not really. It's a range. Our donor profile fits pretty much with the profile of many charities. Women between 35 and 50 years old who are involved in the community and want to make an impact. What we've done is we've taken two elements of Latin American culture. Latin Americans Hispanics like to make friends. You have Roberto Carlos with his song, Quiero hacer un millón de amigos, like I want to make 1 million friends, yes. And also the element of fun. So we dedicate our work not much into fundraising, but friend raising. And by friend raising, what I mean is making valuable connection with people and building communities. An example of that is the work that we've done with the Scotiabank and their employees. So we've targeted the Latin American employees, and they've embraced one of our signature events, which I put some information to you, because this event is taking place on Thursday. So here I put it's a salsa event. So what two great elements of Latin American culture, which is dance and music, to have the employees of Scotiabank involved, and that way as well being able to take advantage of their corporate matching program. Because in Transforming Faces, we also have a matching program. Every donation that's provided over $200 can be matched. So plus the match that we receive from other community groups, either if it's Rotary or Scotiabank, can go farther. So this is an example in which what we have bring the enthusiasm and the great willingness of and goodwill. I always say we wouldn't exist if it wasn't for the goodwill of people in each of the corporations and the organizations that are willing to pass along the opportunities to either sell a ticket or to make a pledge. And this is one of the examples. The other ones is bringing people to the projects, what we call the exposure trips. And some people go back to the countries where they came from, or that have traveled before, and they've become ambassadors for us. Because it's very difficult for organizations like Transforming Faces, which our clients or beneficiaries are not here, to how do we manage to bring our cause and promote the services that we're doing. So we have doctors that have gone abroad, not to do the surgeries, but support the work, just as Cuso had mentioned, and help to empower each one of the partners and communities.
And Bernardo, you as a member of the Hispanic community yourself, do you find that you're attracted to projects and causes that are closer to that community, or does it depend?
Well, definitely more towards the Hispanic community. And I wanted to say something regarding your previous question. I believe, and it's probably, I don't know if the Hispanic people or the Latin people in the room can agree with me or not, but at least that's how I was before. I believe we come from a culture where we don't believe in other people, different from Canadians or Americans. So for us as a Latin, to convince or to tell a Latin, hey, can you work or collaborate or donate to this program is difficult because we come from that culture. And in terms of what we have done in the past, like as a Latin culture, we have seen so many things in the past through the churches itself that we don't believe, right? So I think we need to address that first, and that's something that when we are in Canada, those are one of the things that start changing inside of us. In my particular case, when I was in Colombia, I was never part of any charity work, not regarding about money necessarily, but regarding time or knowledge. But when I came to Canada, something happened here because I started to see something different here, a different culture. I became a part of a project to help Colombian professionals, and that was the first time ever in my life donating or giving my time to help other people to overcome some difficulties when they were settling down here in Canada. Then, how much time do I have?
Not much.
Not much. Then 1 minute, okay. As I was here, and I've been here for 18 years, so that happened at the beginning when I first came to Canada years ago. But more recently, in the past 7 years, I've been more involved, and I'm wearing two hats. I can say I'm wearing two hats right now. One from the organization that I represent, which is my school and our foundation. But the other one is on a personal level. I volunteer. I am an active member of a community center that focuses on Hispanic community. I am volunteer there. I work there 3 times a week, and I not only volunteer my time, but I volunteer also my resources, my knowledge in that place, because I have learned something different here. Canada has taught me something, has taught me something here. Okay.
Great, and also we will open it up to questions from the audience. So, if you have something that you want to ask to all groups or to everyone or to anyone in particular, start thinking of that now, because we'll open it up in a few minutes. Both Marco and Barb, you work a lot with volunteers, and there's that cross-cultural element. And Barb, you kind of hinted at it in the beginning there, just that volunteers often can have an impact when they bring a certain experience or background and also a skill set. As someone who may want to get involved, when you're deciding whether to volunteer locally, overseas, how do you know when it's best to become a volunteer, apply for that, or say make a donation, a financial donation? How do you think, from your point of view, a volunteer should be thinking before they apply?
That's a really good question, and they say it is that potential applicants to volunteer need to see our ads or be engaged with us 7 substantive kinds of connections. So they need to see our ads 7 times, they need to hear about us over 7 years. So it takes, people take their time to think about when exactly is the right time for them to do an international volunteer placement. The things need to fall in place in terms of your availability. Sometimes people wait until they're retired or their kids are out of the home and that kind of stuff. So there's a whole bunch of factors there that actually play into those decisions. At Cuso International, what we try to do is really, through part of our work in engaging with a range of communities, being out there, letting people know about the opportunities, is to try and bring those people closer into us and to really think about the opportunities for giving back in the international, through international development. We've had great success too in terms of our engagement in the Latin American Hispanic communities, working with different associations and reaching out to those who really are in a position to volunteer. They've been thinking about it for some time. They have the skills that are required for some of our placements. And so really what we've been doing to engage people in that is we bring projects to them. We try to bring the stories of our volunteers, what they've been doing in the field, how it's impacted on their life, how it's impacted on the lives of others as well. This coming week, we have a group of youth coming from El Salvador who have been part of a pilot project, or not a pilot, it's not a pilot anymore, but part of a project for the last couple of years with Stratford Festival to look at developing opportunities in the theatre community for employment and entrepreneurship. And so these, I think there's 7 or 8 youth coming, and they're coming here to do a performance. So we're bringing that to various Hispanic community connection or community organizations to profile the work that that our volunteers have been involved in as well, and some of the successes of that work. I'd also just like to say that we are looking for volunteers with professional skills, 2 in 5 years plus experience. That is what our partners are asking of us. They're asking us to find those sets of skills. So, you know, that again, that's another factor that falls into it. And we're also have quite an intensive screening and pre-departure training process. And we're really looking for people who are open to giving. They want to share their skills. They don't want to go in and just say, this is how you should be doing things. They have a commitment to a long-term relationship with those partners. We hope that people will stay involved when they get back through e-volunteering, and also in terms of promoting opportunities and the work that they've done as well.
Thanks, and I think that's really important to emphasize there just on how much of our work is listening to local partners. You know, I would hope that most of us are in it because, not because of a need we want to give necessarily, or we want to contribute, but also the need is there on the other side, whether that's a local organization that has a need or an international program that, you know, has a gap that can be filled either by volunteers or funds. Marco, have you experienced I want to talk briefly about the challenges when you bring people from different cultural backgrounds, and whether that's non-Aboriginal Canadians working with Aboriginal communities here in Canada, or Canadians going to, say, Bolivia or Haiti. Are there things that organizations should be thinking about, sensitivities or issues that you need to keep in mind when you bring cultures together?
Frontiers Foundation is one of perhaps the only Canada-made organization, Aboriginal, with a board of directors where the majority has native Aboriginal background, and it is getting old. It last. On June the 26th of this year, Frontiers Foundation has celebrated 50 years of voluntary service activity in Canada. So 50 years, it's quite a good number of years. And a sure sign that our programs were successful is when the community, the smaller communities that I mentioned, ask for Operation Beaver volunteers to go back in their communities, because according to them, they made a big difference. They worked, they helped the teachers, for instance, in the Northwest Territories or in the Yukon or Nunavut, as volunteer tutors. Working as such, they worked with the teachers under the leadership of the real teacher and the real parents and real students, you know, and they made happy the teachers, they made happy the parents, they made happy the students, because they were able to go to the next grade. And by the time they are leaving these smaller communities, the parents, the teachers, and especially the children are crying. So that's a very good sign that our Operation Beaver volunteers made a difference. So perhaps that answers your question. Thank you.
Thank you. At this time, I'll invite, if anyone wants to ask a question at this point before we go on to some of the final questions. Anyone have anything that comes to mind immediately? Okay. Certainly just raise your hand, though, as for the final portion of the panel here, and we'll get to your question. One important piece, because I think many of us, well, there's a range of really big organizations, but maybe it's a general assumption that many nonprofits are small. But certainly I think one challenge is to where do we put our efforts, whether it's do we train all of our staff on how to use Twitter and spend all day tweeting about our programs, or do we try and do school visits and really invest in educating people on the cause, or doing sponsorship, partnerships and the financial side. I find it's a balance of where do you put your staff, where do you make the most effort. So I want to hear from all of you on what you have found to be the balance there in terms of what's important to your organization, what maybe has not worked. Did you try a campaign where you were emphasizing too much on social media or not enough on social media? And I just wanted to open up to also feel free to share anything that that didn't work as well as did. Thank you.
Thank you. So we recently engaged in a fundraising strategy and reflection. We did a survey of donors. We found out that our current fundraising initiatives have generally been equal or better than industry averages for small NGOs, and that donor satisfaction is high. And I say what we've done is we're taking a very personalized approach in the work that we do, a value-based approach in which we're trying to align our values with the ones of corporations, communities, and individuals. We don't take donors for granted and also value them. We know that donors now are very knowledgeable, savvy about the challenges and pitfalls of charities. We try not to over-solicit. People hate direct mails and they don't like to be harassed by phone calls and so on. So some people say we should be doing more asks. Others, say we should try to do more nurturing, I will say, and cultivation of donors. That is a big thing. But one of the things that people appreciate the most is the fact that we are very conscious of the images and the work that we do with the children. We try to not exploit the images of the children. We don't try to fall into what's called pornography of poverty. So we don't want to perpetuate the stigma of the cleft. And most, if you go to our website, you'll see that most of the children are in a picture, perhaps with a family member. They're just not isolated. They're a lot of the support and the success of a child being able to overcome all these barriers that they have is by having a parent or a guardian helping them. But the fact that we're able to go across the life of a child for 15 years and show how this child is doing is also something remarkable. I go and visit these countries many times, and I see how some of the children, the age of my daughter, have grown, and I see them coming back and having friends, and donors can see that. They can go beyond as I said, the infomercials, the big bucks that is spent on fundraising campaigns that's being wasted, and where fundraising becomes the main focus. And I think for small organizations is to find their niche, personalize their approach, and nurture their donors is something important, and that's where we should do more. When we've tried to deviate from there is when things have not gone right. So with the little money that we have in fundraising, we try to invest in enlarging our donor community and engage them as much as we can while educating them about cleft lip and palate.
I definitely agree with Esteban. Personal interaction, I think, is very important. Definitely, talking from the donor point of view, I believe personal interaction is very important, as well as the engagement and the follow-up, not just going after someone for one-time donation, but more on this is what, like Esteban was saying, this is what, if you donate for this cause, for these children, this is what it's going to be. Or an example, this is this person in 10 years, what is going to happen? Or continue that relationship, continue like a follow-up, I will say. On a personal level, I participate in different projects, and not only to the point that I went to see the projects myself, and you get that interaction and that knowledge. That is what not force you, but what brings you, what motivates you to keep doing that. I do not agree with, or I do not like soliciting, as you mentioned it. I receive emails and letters like by dozens, and they ended up in the garbage. I normally don't read them. So I believe that personal interaction is very important. And also, each of us, we have our own interest, our own hobbies, our own faith. So I believe we need to, as Esteban said also, find a niche. So I have found mine. I work in certain areas. I am a Christian, and I believe in what the Word of God says. So I support those organizations or certain organizations within that faith. So it's obviously each of us have our own interest. So go after the people that you, or learn about the person, and then go after the people in certain areas. So you will target the communication more efficiently, I believe.
Bernardo, I just have a question for you. What encouraged you to give, when you were making your decisions about philanthropy, what motivates you to give either overseas to an organization like Daughters for Life versus giving to an organization that's based here in Canada, or an organization that's working within the Latin American community?
Well, I think obviously I'm from Colombia, so I have a very tight love for Colombian and its people, obviously. And my two business partners, they're Jewish. They're both Jews. So when we get in contact with this, we get to meet this person, the person who leads the Daughters for Life Foundation, Dr. Iseldin Abuleish. And I don't know if you guys know about that organization, but it's basically an organization to support women from the Middle East, to bring them to Canada to get educated, because they don't have possibilities there. So we are in the education field. I believe my two partners, and this is just my belief, I haven't asked them this question, but I believe, as Dr. Haddad said in his presentation, maybe a little bit of laundry, conscious laundry with them, because they're Palestinian women basically coming here. So, but we also, we obviously support that initiative because it's in education, and we believe in education. And what we're doing, we're educating about 13,000 people every year. No? So we don't only teach them English, we teach them some other things as well. So participating in that initiative was a good match for us. In the other hand, on a personal level, because I'm from Colombia, I have that tied with Colombia. So when I see a project in Colombia, I'm more maybe motivated to go and see it. And obviously because I can go and see it by myself, and you know. I hope I answered the question. Okay.
I just wanted to build on what the other two panelists were saying. In terms of our approach at Cuso International, I would say there's two streams that run through our outreach and building relationships, and that is a story base. We've got some incredibly powerful stories from our partners and our volunteers in terms of the work that's been done through the support of Cuso International volunteers and through the initiative of our overseas partners. So a lot of our outreach and our social media and our information sessions really builds on the story that we have to tell. So that has been quite successful for us. Obviously, we're doing a lot of work in social media at this point, but what we haven't forgotten is the importance of building relationships. So particularly when we're working with various different diaspora communities in Canada, what we've noticed is we have to build relationships because many communities don't know who Cuso International is. They don't know what the opportunities are with Cuso International. So we have to take the time to really build those relationships and trust so that people will want to be involved in our work for the long term.
I was the group leader at Kepawa, Quebec, 2 years after I came to Canada. And in my group, I had a volunteer from Egypt, a volunteer from St. Kitts, 2 volunteers from Canada, one from Ontario and the other one from Alberta, and a volunteer from Haiti. So I noticed that they worked quite nicely, in the community. When I became a program coordinator of Frontiers Foundation, I placed a volunteer from Pakistan, a volunteer from Israel, a volunteer from Mauritius, a Hindu, and a volunteer from Scotland, a Catholic. 4 volunteers representing the main religions of the world. And some people phoned the office and said, Marco, how could you place those people together? They are going to kill each other. But this was the most successful project because every representative of these religions tried to be the best. They behaved very well. They agreed to eat chicken and rice almost every day. But they accomplished to build a log frame house in central British Columbia in a little town known as Morristown. So that, just for you to know that what was supposed to be a failure, it became a big plus. But also, over the years, we had some volunteers who didn't fulfill what they were supposed to or they promised to. And the communities, the chiefs and so on, they phoned the office and said, please take them out from our community. Either they were misbehaving, drinking, or getting into drugs, but the chief said that they had enough trouble themselves with their own younger people and they didn't want additional problems.
So just quickly for those at the back who may not have heard, just the question was to Esteban, what is the breakdown of the cultural background of your donors?
Yeah. Sadly to say, yes, they have paid off in terms of they have built other relationships. Like, for instance, the event that you're talking about, every year we used to showcase a country. And in one of those cases we did with Peru, for instance. And that's when the salsa event basically was born. Because a lot of the people that went to that event were Scotiabank employees. And there was such a huge energy out of that cocktail event that I felt, what else can we do? And they all, I think between pisco sours, and goodwill, this idea of the salsa event came in, but also connections with the Peruvian consulate, with the Canadian Peruvian Chamber, and to be honest, if we would have liked as well with Canadian mining companies, but for many reasons I will not discuss here, but we haven't want to touch that source of money. And basically, there's a lot of research in terms of what causes and what not causes cleft lip and palate, but contamination in water is one of the issues, so we're concerned about that. But the point is that when you want to align your values with the values as well of your with individuals and organizations, you have to start looking at those issues as well, so that we don't do more harm, as Alex was talking about. But to answer your question, is not the majority of our donors. The Hispanic community is not. It's a thriving, increasing force, but it is not. And I think a lot has to do because, as Bernardo said, a lot of people donate to where they come from. And so we've been able to inspire the Peruvians and Argentinians. I would say more Peruvians than the Argentinians. But if we had a much wider presence in Latin America, I think we will have a much wider group. But just we don't have the funds to do that.
Thank you. So the takeaway is, if you're wooing supporters, always have a pisco sour nearby. A very final, as our final question, a very practical question. I was curious whether it's engaging the Hispanic community here or for the benefit of potential local partners in Latin America. Have you, this is the issue of language, have you produced any materials or website in Spanish? I'm curious for everyone to share whether they have a Spanish language portion of their website, or if they don't, or they tried that, and how important maybe language is when you're working with this Hispanic community.
Yeah. Not necessarily for we don't have in our website a space for Spanish or Latin America, but there are program documents. We try to piggyback on what is out there. We don't like to reinvent the wheel, as to say, because there's great stuff already being done. For instance, in Cleft Lip and Palate by the American Cleft Lip and Palate Foundation, of the Cleft Foundation in the United States, that is in Spanish, and so we distribute that to our partners. But we've tried through Canada Helps, to have a presence of Spanish and English and French, which are the languages here in Canada, but we haven't, for the same reason why I think to be as well respectful for the other countries where we work. We may have to also put something in Thai or in Hindu or in other languages, but. Programming, definitely, we've used Spanish speaking materials. A few ones we produce ourselves, but we tried not to reinvent the wheel and use the good stuff that is out there.
At Cuso International, increasingly we are starting to translate our materials into Spanish, partly because if we're recruiting volunteers from within the region, then we need to have those materials readily available for volunteers. We also are doing outreach sessions in Spanish now as well. So, what we've recognized is it's a really important tool for engaging and developing those relationships and building that trust within the communities, and are moving towards more and more of our stuff being available in Spanish. A part of our website also is available in Spanish.
Our annual report, as you will see, and you will notice, is both in English and French, that are the official languages of this country. I have noticed that many of the information booklets and pamphlets and reports, especially in the province of Ontario, are only in English. So I would encourage you to do it in both official languages. But anyway, back to the question, if it's also in Spanish. Last September the 21st, the native people that came from Central America and South America and ended up living in the city of Toronto, we have raised the indigenous symbol, the Wipala, at City Hall. And when then some journalists show up, they take pictures and they write up in English. And today we had Freddy was here, Freddy Vélez from El Correo, Spanish local newspaper, and he promised that he's gonna write up about the Wipala flag raising ceremony. So that's the extent of our efforts to use the Spanish Spanish language. However, any Spanish-speaking volunteers, they end up speaking with me at the office. Thank you.
Great. So I think that's it for this panel. I want to give a big thank you to our panelists today.